Next up, let's get the new to-do form to work. So we're going to make a new component, and let's just call it to-do form.js, or actually let's do new to-do form, because in this case, we're still only going to have one form component, but there's going to be an edit form somewhere. It's going to be in the to-do component, but just for clarity, we'll do new to-do form. Okay, so here's my basic structure. We know there's going to be a form in there, and it's actually a very simple form because there's really only one input that we need. So that input is going to be type set to text, and we're going to have this, let's do a placeholder here for new to do or something like that, new task. Let's also do a label that just says new to do, and then we need to set the HTML for, and let's just call it task. So this input needs to have an ID also set to task, and now we need to make this a controlled input, which means we need to have some state involved. So I'm going to make my constructor once again, super props. Even though we're not using props in the constructor, we could just do super. I know I say that all the time, but I just want to make that clear. And we'll initialize our state, and all we really need for now is task, which is going to be an empty string. And we'll use this .state.task for the value of this input, this .state.task. Next, let's add in the onChange. So onChange equals this dot our good friend handleChange. So let's define handleChange. HandleChange is going to take the event object, and inside of here we're doing a this.setState. Same thing we've seen every time we've made a React form, or almost every time. We're going to use a computed property. What we want is event.target.name, and we're going to set that to event.target.value. And before we forget, let's make sure we bind it. This.handleChange equals this.handleChange.bind this. Okay, so sort of a trick question here. Right now, if I add my new to-do list or new to-do form, which I've already imported, if I render one, what do you think will happen as I type? So new to-do form, what will be updated in our state, given the state of our component right now, given the condition that it's in? Well, I'm actually missing one really important piece. I'm using event.target.name, but currently I don't have a name on the input. So it's going to be an empty string that it's setting. So inside of our state, as I type here, if I go to the DevTools and click on the form, watch the state here. As I type, it has a property, empty string is set to the letter A. So every time I update this, we're changing empty string. That's not what we want. So back over here, we need to make sure we add in name and set it to task. And that, once again, has to match exactly what we're using in the state. So now if I come to the DevTools and I select new to-do form, we look at the state. As I type, you can see that it's updated here. All right, so that's done. Now we need to make sure this form actually creates a new to-do. So we're going to add an onSubmit into here. And we also need to make sure we have a button. So let's call this this.handleSubmit, which does not exist. And while we're here, let's add a button. So inside the form, after the input, we'll do a button, just add to do. Okay, so that should call handleSubmit when you click the button. Right now we don't have that defined. So let's do that now. HandleSubmit takes an event, and the first thing I'll do is call event.preventDefault. And then what we're going to do is call some method that's been passed down that will actually create the to-do. So we need to go back to our to-do list and add a method called create. So create is going to take a, let's call it new to-do object, and it's just going to add it into the to-dos in state. So this.setState, and we'll just do to-dos is equal to an array that takes all the existing this.state.todos and then adds in new to do. Okay, and then of course we need to make sure that we bind create. So this dot create equals this dot create dot bind. This gets a little tiresome. And then we're going to pass that create method down to our form right here. And what do we want to call it? Let's call it create to do equals this dot create. So now we have this method inside of our new to do form called create to do as a prop. and we'll call it instead of handle submit. So this.props.create to do. And what are we going to pass in? Well, this.state, because that's the object we care about. We just want task, and it's already in an object for us, so just pass in this.state. And then the last thing that we like to do is clear this.state. So we'll do this.setState, and we're going to set task to be an empty string again, just so that the form no longer displays the information that was in there. Now, it's highly possible we have a problem. I can already see one. We're not binding handle submit. So this.handle submit equals this.handle submit.bind. Okay. There's still a high possibility we have a problem. Let's see if it works. So we're going to type something in here. Let's say bathe cat, add to do. Okay, it's working. It's been added to the state, and our form is being cleared. All right, so that's the to-do form. Next, in the next video, we'll work on removing to-dos, working with IDs, that sort of thing.